From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire, it's The Men's Room, a show by men, about men, and for everyone. Sponsored by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center and hosted by Damien Licata and Forrest Seymour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Men's Room. I'm Damien Licata, and this is Forrest Seymour.
Yes,
we are your co-hosts. This program is brought to you by the Monadnock Men's Resource Center.
That's true, which also sponsors a drop-in support group for men every Sunday night at 7 o'clock in Keene, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the show, so stay tuned.
That's right, and yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to give you a lot of details about that at the end of the show, and normally we will take a little time at the beginning of this show here to comment on something interesting that's going on in the news, but we have a really interesting topic today.
This is too interesting to dawdle.
That's right, and we want to get right to it. We're going to be talking today about religion. We're going to be talking about the church, churches, I should say, plural, and we'll be talking about various concepts of Jesus and masculinity, and where those two concepts intersect, and in some cases, in some people's opinion, maybe conflict.
Yes, it'll be interesting.
So it's going to be an interesting conversation, and I'll just comment that it being Casual Friday today, I naturally wore a tie.
You're just a contrarian.
That's
you
right.
are. All right, so our guest today is, actually this is our first, he has the honor of being our first repeat guest. It was so great the first time, he's back a second time.
That's right.
This is Bill Beardsley, who is a good friend of ours and a minister. He was ordained in the United Church of Christ in 1984 and served as a pastor and spiritual guide in New Hampshire and Massachusetts since then. He is a pastoral counselor as well, certified as a fellow in the American Association of Pastoral Counselors and a member of Spiritual Directors International. He's been involved in peace and justice work from a young age, and during the Vietnam War, he was an unrecognized conscientious objector in resistance to the war. He is currently the assistant director of Interfaith Campus Ministries and Club Outreach at Franklin Pierce College. He has a private practice here in Keene called Renewal, Counseling and Spiritual Guidance in Keene, and he has been involved in leading men's retreats within churches, outside of churches, and been a part of men's groups for a long time. So it's great to have you on the show, Bill.
It's great to be here.
Welcome back to the men's room.
Thanks back. Yeah, thanks for coming
Great to
back.
have you here. Yeah.
Thank you.
And this, the work that you've done with men is particularly of interest today, because one of the things we want to talk about is the notion that there aren't a lot of men flocking to churches in some people's view. I'd be interested to know what you think about that in your experience. Have you noticed a decline, or that there are fewer men attending churches on Sundays or involved in church life?
I think men generally have an uncomfortable relationship with the church, with faith, with Christianity, because it enters, any spirituality or religion enters into a realm that I'm afraid men generally are uncomfortable with, where it has to do with feelings, with relationship, with a sense of the whole human being.
Now, that's an interesting idea when you talk about the whole human being, because I think that what a lot of people are putting forth is this idea that the masculine part of men is that part of the whole human being is what's not being addressed or is not being spoken to or welcomed.
Into a lot of Christian
into a lot of Christian communities, right?
Yeah, that's what people
Have been saying, and there's a lot of writing about it, and this idea of the sort of feminization of Christianity, and even of the concept of Jesus as being a part of that. I'm wondering if, and maybe I'm assuming, but I'm wondering if that is what you meant by the whole person.
Well, first of all, this whole idea of the feminization of Christianity raises my hackles. I think when you look at the Christian story, you're looking at a man in the person of Jesus who experienced a whole range of human emotions and what it meant to be human. You can read the various stories in the various Gospels and extra biblical accounts of a man who at once could be weeping, for instance, for his dear friend Lazarus, or weeping over Jerusalem when he was distressed about the fact that people hadn't listened to the Jewish prophets nor understood what peace was about. And then in the next story, you meet a man who is screaming at his religious elders, accusing them of being hypocrites, white sepulchres of death, vipers. He's turning over tables in the temple and chasing out the money changers. The next moment, he's tenderly attending to a woman who is bent over in grief and mourning. The next story, he is engaged in disputation and dialogue with the men in the community. The next story, he's being lavished with oil from a woman all over his body, being criticized by the men for that. There is a richness and a wholeness to Jesus that I think has been largely ignored because of the co-opting of the church by the political arena and the state.
The political arena and
the state.
the state.
You at least in my reading of the Bible and of history, Christian scriptures and history, you can see a movement from an oppressed group of people who were having to worship men and women together in each other's homes in secret in caves, and there was a presence of many women in those early communities. And then when Constantine came along and changed his tune about the Christians, they no longer became a persecuted minority religion, but a part of the empire.
Right.
They became incorporated into the empire. They took on the garb of the empire. They took on the ways of the emperor. The hierarchy took over. The pomp and the circumstance and a lot of that.
One might say they were co-opted by the state.
They were co-opted. They allowed themselves to be co-opted. I mean, you can see it today.
Right.
After being, Nero, all these people in tar and turn them into human torches to light the streets leading up to Rome. These stories of being fed to the lions were true stories. I mean,
So being co-opted probably looked pretty good.
it looked,
Absolutely.
I'm sure it looked good. Not that that's a good excuse for.
So today, what do you make? I mean, in your mind, is there a problem? In terms of is Christianity now not appealing to men? Is it feminization? Is it something else? Is there not a problem? What do you make of this sort of dialogue? A lot of which goes on the internet about people really up in arms about how we got to get masculine, get a tougher, more muscular Christianity to draw in these men who are in this reading, are no longer interested in the church because the church is wimped out.
I don't buy the language. I think it's disrespectful of women and continues with the Christian misogyny that has existed for ages against women to say that the church is becoming feminized. Why are women drawn to the church to begin with?
Because it's a safe place, as opposed to...
Not necessarily a safe place. They see in this one that we call our teacher, our leader, our savior, whatever your nomenclature is, They see a person who, in his time and place, when he fraternized with women, healed and touched women in public, he was breaking every religious social taboo that existed at the time. He received, and he certainly wasn't a feminist, but within the context of that culture, women would naturally respond to him. This has been from the day one. And men responded to him. Why did the men respond to him? Well, that's a good question. They saw something different in this man. Although they didn't understand either at each step along the way, you know. It was a gradual process of awakening to who he was and what he was teaching.
Sure. But what about this idea that, that there are some churches that have either been established strictly for this purpose, or who are modifying the way that they preach, or the atmosphere in which they preach, in order to accommodate this idea of what men want. Shorter services is one of the things they're talking about. Shorter sermons, you know, no longer than 15 minutes. No guy's going to sit for longer than 15 minutes and think about anything. So, you know, they're doing things like that. They're doing things like tying it into sports events, or using a lot of military or militaristic sort of trappings as a way of supposedly making men feel more comfortable.
I don't think the church is here to make anybody feel comfortable, men or women. I think it was Robert McAfee Brown said that we are here to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. If men are feeling feminized, men have work to do. I do, however, I read a number of the articles and online reflections on this, and I find that on the one hand, there is in the culture, and Robert Bly was criticized for naming this a long time ago, that there is a feminization of men, but not because, well, who knows why it is. Because changing roles, because of changing identity, men have abdicated something, I feel, and not replaced it with anything else. And Bly, you know, swung in the opposite direction, having these, you know, almost martial gatherings of men in the wilderness and getting in touch with the wild man and all of that kind of thing. I think that the church has betrayed the message of Jesus Christ for men and women, and it has created an enculturated entity that perhaps one could say is created for safety, to help people feel comfortable, to help them feel natural, to help them feel welcomed. I don't believe in militarism. I don't believe in the military. One could say I'm a pacifist. I don't like that term. I am a warrior for peace. Jesus, as far as I'm concerned, was a warrior for peace. There is, you know, to take what is appealing to men in the culture and put it into the church is not going to solve this problem. It may help men to feel comfortable and help them turn the church more into a tool of militarism and of the state and of that sports competitive kind of thing. That's not all men are about.
Or
That's
what you're
not,
saying the church should be about.
Or that the church should be about. And I don't buy the categories that these people are using to say what is a man, number one, and what is a woman, what is masculine and what is feminine.
Right.
I think that they're, you know, while a lot of the articles were very astute, insightful, theologically based and all of that, I sensed a lot of homophobia, I sensed a lot of misogyny. You know, the article, you know, calling men wimps and, you know, get back in the, you know, where's the days of John Wayne and the war and the, you know, all.
Yeah,
That-
there's a real, you know, what's the word I want? There's a retro kind of.
Well, you know, we've all seen that bumper sticker, "What would Jesus do?" And I think that one of the things that they're trying to say is, you know, what would a macho Jesus do?
Yeah.
And you know, and is that really the question that we want, you know, to be asking? Is, you know, I think that to me, the image of Jesus is, as you described, you know, is someone who is trying to bring out our best nature, and you know, the traditional of men and women, but the traditional, you know, image of masculinity does not necessarily appeal to our better nature.
That's
always.
right. Yeah.
And so I think there's you know, in terms of uplifting, you know, as a religious experience, I don't think it's necessarily, you know, the end that we want to be working for. But I do think that that it does make a certain segment of the male population more comfortable and less challenged around those ideas of masculinity.
So changing the church to sort of accept these traditional kind of old school notions of what masculinity is makes things more comfortable for men to come in the door, but it's not challenging them about
Right.
these historic behaviors.
It
which have
maintains
been,
the status quo.
right.
I think that it discourages introspection,
Yeah.
you know, and it encourages that a kind of you know, sort of, you know, almost militaristic approach
Yeah.
to religion, you know, that I think is in part a reflection of the type of brand of Christianity that comes out of our administration right now, and not just of the administration, but a lot of political and Christian right individuals that at the moment have a great deal of influence and power.
Yeah. Jerry Falwell, you mentioned earlier,
Right.
before the show, he was a huge personage in the evangelical movement, and a real proponent of this wedding of what I call imperial theology, you know, that is born out of this sense that God and the United States, the Christian God and the United States are one thing.
Right. Right.
You know, they are not, they don't believe in democracy, they believe in theocracy.
Well, and this militarization that we're talking about is coming at a time where our country's been at war for several years. Obviously, a very unpopular war, but nonetheless, at war. I mean, you know, you can just see the influences, the amount of sort of faux camo clothing that people wear now is exponentially larger than it was 5 years ago. It's just one example. You know, the SUVs that all are beginning to look like military vehicles.
Video games.
Yes, right. I mean, so there is a way in which this phenomena in the larger Christian community is in some ways just reflecting this larger phenomena in our society, it seems to me, of this kind of militarization of our society. But it is also interesting, I think there is a way in which for some Christians, you know, the stakes feel so, you know, really tangible. I was really shocked, actually, by one of the pieces that I looked at on masculine Christianity by Scott Lively article by him. I mean, you know, some interesting points he was making, but he ends it by saying that the alternative to bringing more men into the church is to surrender and look on in resignation as our children are marched off into slavery in a foreign land. Now, I was shocked to find that line at the end of that piece, because, you know, to me the implication, I mean, what we're talking about is the Muslims coming, right, and taking over. I mean,
this kind of thinking is what gave us the Crusades.
Right, and so I mean, to what extent is this sort of, you know, this, oh, let's get the men in the church really about, let's be, you know, we need to fear the Muslims in the world who are going to rise up and, you know, whatever.
It's not just the Muslims, it's the other, it's the stranger, it's the illegals, it's the homosexuals, it's the strong women, it's the African American. You know, it is this phenomenon that again, borders on a kind of socio-political, theological, incestuous theology, you know, that I think has dominated the church. Now, I was just in my denomination, the United Church of Christ, at the conference level, we have a number of groups that are concerned with justice and peace. Now, this gathering was, and there are people that are involved in all different types of justice and peace, from the Middle East, to nuclear weapons, to nonviolence, to, you know, there are a lot of different interest groups. And we wanted to bring all of us together around a table to talk about collaboration, to talk about vision, to talk about being what in the tradition we call prophetic, not kowtowing to the culture or the state or even the church. And it was a very mixed group of men and women. And, you know, it struck me, because I've been thinking a lot about this subject and anticipating coming here, you know, and watching my own denomination. These are courageous, courageous people that are out there working on economic justice, working on being what we call in our denomination open and affirming church for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender persons, having partnership with churches in Zimbabwe, earth stewardship, how to be more ecologically minded and become a green church as it is, you know. And the interesting thing was that every single one of us, no, everybody but one person was over 50, 50, 55.
Yeah, and that is interesting.
That's a very serious concern for me. Now, in general, I think that there is, because the church has become, that there is a tendency to, for many people to feel displaced.
So do you? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, coming around to that, to the first question I asked you, which was that do you buy into this notion that men are attending church in declining numbers? If that's true, what do you think is the way to address that? What do you think is the answer to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I read those statistics amongst the articles that I looked at. I've seen statistics from more mainline analysts. There's a general decline in church attendance, and I'm not sure what the proportion of men to women is. Again, I feel men have always felt uncomfortable with the church. I think back on my childhood and being raised in the church. I had probably 2 men teachers in the church. The rest were women, you know.
Well, this is what I was thinking, that it seems to me that, I mean, and I'm not a member of a church. I don't have inside experience, but it seems to me that women have always done the heavy lifting in churches, that they have done the work, and the men have been, you know, historically, the men have been in charge.
Yeah, they've dealt with the property, they've dealt with, up until, I mean, one of the early churches that I served, women could not even be deacons. They had 2 separate boards of deacons in the church, and women couldn't serve communion.
Right.
And this is in a mainline liberal Protestant denomination.
No.
Right.
So, you know, there were roles. There were roles for men. They were always the ones that took care of the property and were primarily the leaders of many of the committees that had to do with finance and
So now men are
maintenance
having to
and
share
all that.
power with women, and
They
they
have
don't
to
like
share
it.
power. They don't like it. Men don't like it. They haven't come to terms with the fact that that is appropriate and that there is a place for both men and women in the church. But I think it's a deeper spiritual malady malady and psychological malady also. I am not a feminist. I am a man. And I love my manhood and I love my masculinity.
Right.
But I also cry and I hurt and I express anger and fear and love, and I love to touch and be touched, you know? Not all men are comfortable with that. And I think that Jesus even models some of that. For me, Jesus has been a real male role model for me all my life.
That's interesting. And we have to wrap up. Can you believe it? We'll have to do it again. I
know. And that's what happens all the time
It
here.
does. We're going to have to
So-
stretch the time out. But
Yep.
thank you so much. I mean, this has been fascinating for me. There's so much for me to learn, and I feel like I have been picking up information. I appreciate it.
Thank you
so much
for
for
having me. I
Nice.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
We'll
It's
get you back.
fascinating.
We'll
So-
get you back yet again.
Yeah, okay.
We'll do some
Right.
more.
So, and we
wow.
would encourage you to join in this conversation as
Yes,
well. If you have some ideas or thoughts about this, if you are a man who feels either, really welcomed by their church community and really comfortable there, or if you share the feelings of many other men that the church somehow doesn't speak to them, we'd like to hear from you and hear what that experience is.
You can call us. Our phone will be up with the credits, but also on our website, which is mmrconline.org. You can get to our video archive, which is on YouTube and includes an ability to post comments and all that. We'd love to hear from you.
That's right.
And also, quick plug for the drop-in support group for all men.
That's right.
Every Sunday night at 7 o'clock, 25 Roxbury Street, right next to Aubuchon's Hardware in Keene.
That's right. We have these brochures in and around town. If you see one, pick it up. Gives you some more information about what the group is and what it's about. It's a great place to get together, connect with other men, and to just talk about what's going on, with you.
Yeah.
So
come
I
join us.
think that's it. I think we're done.
I think we're done. It's been great.
Thanks again for joining us in the men's room, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Yeah, boys.